welcome. This is Drew Vision IT Consulting. This is another in our IT Seller Series, Consulting Sales Superiority. So today I want to talk about the difference between good IT salespeople and exceptional IT salespeople. And the difference is imagination. And you might be wondering, how in the world would imagination have anything to do with IT, let alone IT sales, or for that matter, any type of sales? Well, I'm going to go through today 3 quick examples showing exactly how imagination can be used in the workplace. Most people think it's something that you're born with, that you're either imaginative or you're not, or you're a small child. The answer is imagination can be a learned trait. And so if you know a couple of key areas in your career when you pursue excellence to really kind of zero in on and focus on, hone your craft, decide to be a better salesperson than you were yesterday, then you'll focus on these 3 areas and you'll find it is so much easier to be imaginative. So let's get right into it. Okay, so for my first example, you got to know your solutions, right? And what I mean by that is this isn't about knowing every single little feature and every little ticky-tack benefit specific to your solution, but this is at its core understanding what's underneath of your solutions, what makes them tick and tie, what makes them work, what's the cohesion that makes it a solution. And I'll give you a perfect example. Right, when I think of ServiceNow, most people think of ServiceNow, they'll probably think of ITSM. Oh, it's a help desk ticketing tool. Yeah, sure, of course it is. But it's not how it was born. Right, every subsequent feature and module that they've added to ServiceNow over the years is because the solution was actually born as a development tool. Right, it was intended to develop literally anything, quickly, seamlessly, rapidly. Right, easy to use, but powerful, robust, and not full of all the glitches and issues that some other products have. And that's because of how it was born. So once you understand that concept and you understand how ITSM paved the way for ServiceNow to become the enterprise that it is today, but it gave birth to ITBM and of course the Now platform. So imagination in this particular example, understanding that, well, okay, so it's a development platform. That means you can turn anything into anything, okay, and it's got data attributes and integrations, right, the Now store, so you can download APIs, connect to hundreds and hundreds of different ecosystem partners is phenomenal. But in this particular case that I'm thinking of a real life customer scenario where we actually pitched the Now platform as an integration tool. And you might be asking, well, why? Why would you use that as an integration hub for all of these things? It's because that's what it is. It's a phenomenal tool to integrate data from disparate sources and to remove ownership of that data from the individual applications, right? Bring it all into a consolidated place, right? And then the screens are so easy to develop from there. You can take pre-existing screens and relabel them, right? You're using your custom tables in a Now platform to create those views, those reports, those dashboards that you're looking for. So in a case where we were looking at a mainframe application that was talking to a SQL server downstream and Oracle server upstream, some of the data was going over to Hadoop, right? And all of these data attributes were critical and timely, but they were sequential, right? One thing's waiting on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And so we pitched the Now platform as the perfect solution to be able to take that data, bring it to one place, get it away from the apps, and expose it to the business. Okay, for our second example for how to be imaginative in sales, know your industry, right? If you're in a particular industry, let's just say automotive for sake of example, is certainly one of the industries that I know the best. And what are the problems and challenges the industry is facing? Well, we certainly know that ever since COVID, it's been impossible to get parts timely and adequately, right, to be able to build the products, the cars, trucks, etc., that we've been able to historically, right? And so given these challenges, right, what are the downstream effects of that? Well, it's slower to get parts. Maybe I'm not getting the parts that I want. Maybe I have to diversify my portfolio of parts to be able to sell things to my customers. So what are some of the ways that I could potentially deal with it? What solutions come to bear? What myriad of solutions come to bear, right? There's more pressure than ever. Hell, we have the automotive workers strike right now, right? What are they concerned about? Certainly they're concerned about pay, but what about worker safety, right? So when I think about that as a challenge, right? We've got worker strikings, we've got supply chain issues and problems. Um, what other issues are there, right? People want to be able to track and know more and more and more about their particular vehicles, their whereabouts. The ESG initiatives to put more and more pressure on companies to be responsible about their carbon emissions, right? So how are they tracking those things, right? What are the solutions in the workplace that very potentially um, affect that? So I'll give you two, I'll call it sub-examples in this particular category. One, let's say in the case of parts constraints, most customers, particularly if they're using antiquated warehouse management systems, may actually have those parts on hand, right? They may have parts whose attributes are valid substitutions in the manufacturing process to be able to build those trucks or cars, right? Maybe, there's only really truly 5 OEMs for most parts in most vehicles, right? So what are the parts on hand which match the specs and the quals to be able to build that vehicle that you want? You work with your customer or your dealer, you say, okay, can we substitute this part? Yes, you can. Okay, I've got it on hand. Now I'm building a truck today, or I'm going to slot it in a couple of weeks, sure, but I can build a truck sooner rather than waiting 3, 4, 6 months, a year, or into infinity for a part that I'm never going to get, right? And to be able to do that, you've got to have data. You've got to have metadata around your parts. You've got to have those associations that show you which parts work with which parts. That's just one sub-example. Another one, in the case of worker safety, well, how could I monitor that? What things affect that, right? And this is a very bright man let me know this particular example, what he was doing. I thought it was so imaginative. He was using video cameras placed above the lines to see and know when workers were outside of their safety zone, right? The cameras can be hooked up to, in this particular case, he was looking at Azure Cloud Service, right? Use those cameras to see those proximities, to see when those workers leave their designated worker safety zone, right? And the reason why is 80% of all accidents happen to that worker, not in their zone where they spend most of their time working, is when they actually leave it. Maybe they just go and talk to their friend who's right, one station up the line. They could get hurt. They don't belong there and they shouldn't be. So video service was one way to tackle that. Another way to be imaginative and potentially track that is, what about like Amazon, or Samsung smartwatches, right? They have geolocating abilities. You put it on your worker. They potentially can monitor their safety zones, or let's say they're going throughout the plant to do safety checks, right? And they have, rugged Samsung products. They could very potentially use those devices, complete their work orders right there. They don't have to go back to a workstation. And what that means is they can complete an assignment, view their next assignment, and keep going. That's more efficient. That's a smarter way to do business. And all that took was existing products and services to be used in an imaginative way, right? And so when you understand your industry, you understand those problems, you can work backwards to what are those solutions that can deliver results of a particular company, that they know everything about what the rest of the company is doing. Most of the time they don't. Many times, especially if you've been at the client for a long time, you probably know more about their particular company and the solutions that they have installed than they might. So I'll give you this example, right? And then we'll conclude the video. So in this example, the client sent an RFP out to recommend and install and deliver a capital expense management solution, right? And if you don't know what that is, it's a way to essentially approve capital expense projects, track them, and then note their return at a later date, right? So what are my capital assets? Where are they? Am I depreciating them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? There's a whole lot to it that would need a whole entire separate video just for me to get into, right? And traditionally, you might look at some of your Oracle-based solutions for that. You might look at, SAP, I believe, has some, and I'm sure there's some other niche players as well. But in this particular scenario, the client was already using ITBM, right? IT Business Management, and in that they had project and portfolio management, and through that they were doing IT Financial Management, right? IT Financial Management, what does that mean? Demand intake, right? Teeing up projects, right? What's the estimate for this project? What are the perceived, returns or benefits from this project? And how do I track it from inception to installation to ultimately deprecation at some date in the future? So how do I track it, the cost, the people, the resources, and all those things associated to it, right? Well, in this particular case, think about it. It's doing exactly what a capital expense management solution would also do. So why would I have two different things doing one function? That's the definition of idiocy. So by knowing the customer in this case and using imagination, you're like, well, it's imagination to realize the problem is expense management, right? Tracking of assets. We're already doing that, right? So it's using a non-standard use case or an off-label use of one thing to be able to treat with another. And with that, that is my third and final example in our series on the difference between good and exceptional in IT consulting sales. I hope you really like this video. Please make sure to click like and subscribe. I need every single follower that I can get. It really does help True Vision Consulting and help us get our channel some better exposure. And as you know, the bigger we get, the better the topics will be for you. So until soon, thanks for listening.